there, very good evening and a warm welcome to the news live on Rupavahini Channel I. I'm Sharon Masquinias.
A very good evening indeed, I'm Javed Bongzo and we begin with the headlines of tonight's news.
Budget 2021 unveils tax concessions and relief for several key sectors. Special attention on health and security sectors. Estate workers' daily salary has been increased up to 1,000 rupees. Interest of housing loans for public sector employees has been reduced to 7%. Retirement age of the private sector has been increased up to 60 years. Minister of Finance says the aim of the government is to build an economy that benefits all communities in the country during the next 5 years. Another 400 COVID-19 patients have fully recovered. Most Venerable Napane Pemasiri Mahanayaka Thera passed away.
Now for those and other stories in detail. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says that the objective of the government is to build an economy trusted on local production based on agriculture. The objective of the next 4 years is to build an economy benefiting each ethnicity through the vistas of prosperity and splendor, the policy framework. Presenting the budget for the year 2021 to the Parliament today, Prime Minister and Finance Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa said that the government is expecting an economic growth up to 6% in the next year. The 75th budget report of the country was presented at the Parliament today. This is the 12th budget report presented by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa in the capacity of Minister of Finance. The budget speech commenced at 1:40 p.m. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa presented the Budget Speech 2021, which focuses on strengthening the 2021-2023 medium-term program of poverty alleviation and economic revival as envisaged within the vistas of prosperity and splendor, the policy framework of the government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Irrespective of the economic standing of the country and the challenges faced by the country, the Prime Minister said that the country must acknowledge the existence of a paradigm shift in the world economy which moved forward with the industrialization has now entered into a technology-driven economy. He said that as policymakers, they must view this as a reason to move away from outdated strategies and in developing the agriculture, industry and services sectors, technology infusion should be prioritized in accessing the integrated production and service processes. The Prime Minister said that the national policies should be formulated with a long-term strategic vision, protecting national sovereignty to exploit the development opportunities that arises as a central hub in the new economic order of the world to both the conventional Western advanced economies and the powerful emerging Eastern economies. He said that the President, on the two occasions when he presented his policy framework to this Parliament, emphasizes the need to implement the policies in the vistas of prosperity and splendor as they will facilitate a country-owned inclusive growth development as desired by the people of this country. He said that the primary objective of the government's social development program is to expand the health services to effectively safeguard people from pandemics such as COVID-19 as well as from the non-communicable diseases which currently have a high incidence. Prime Minister Rajapaksa also said that the government has understood through Gamasamaga Pilisandara program, the people require an economy based on local farm products and agro-industrialization and not a trade economy based merely on imports. He said that the government has also identified the requirement of the people-centric public service with pragmatic systems that addresses the ground-level requirements rather than complex administrative and regulatory methods in discharging the duties of the government. He said that this is a development budget presented to elevate an economy that has been shattered. He added that it covers all sectors under macroeconomic vision aimed at fulfilling the vistas of prosperity and splendor. He said that the budget that will open up numerous special investment opportunities to the business community for production of local goods and services under the competitive setting of the global economy. He added that producers of all scales should strive during the next 3 years to allow local economy to competitively enter to the global economy, while the public sector should provide the necessary support in this regard. The Prime Minister requested all entrepreneurs to utilize the funds hidden locally or internationally in order to evade laws relating to taxes and foreign exchange for the benefit of the country. It is expected to make legal provisions to provide a tax pardon to entrepreneurs, thus utilizing funds for any investment facilitated by this budget under the payment of taxes amounting to 1%, he added. Prime Minister said that the estimated government revenue for 2021 is 1,961 billion rupees. He added that the total government expenditure is 3,525 billion rupees, and as such, the difference between the revenue and the expenditure is 1,564 billion rupees. It is planned to maintain the budget gap at 9% of the GDP, since the private investments, which amounted to 32.3% of the GDP in 2014, has decreased up to 27.6% in 2019, and since it is required to provide a robust start by the government to revive the economic growth which had stagnated recently, he further added. He said that in his belief, the government can manage this budget gap due to enhanced opportunities to reissue local and international currency denominated debt at maturity. He added that the interrelated development proposals presented under this budget are appropriate for rural as well as urban settings, traditional as well as modern contexts. Microfinancial as well as capital market objectives will lead to an increase of the present low level of economic capacity utilization. He also said that the expected economic growth rate for 2021 is 5.5%. He further emphasized that it is a medium-term vision of the government to reduce the budget gap through increasing the economic growth up to 6% and increasing the government revenue from its current level of 9.7% to 14.1%. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa said that the budget deficit is targeted to be 4% due to growth in tax revenue through the expansion of the economy and the trust placed on the management of public expenditure and public enterprises by 2025.
Many reliefs have been proposed through the budget with the objective to uplift the domestic economy and public life. The budget has proposed to extend reliefs for agriculture, tax concessions and a simplified tax policy while facilitating more opportunities for information technology sector. The budget also consists of the proposed increase of daily wage of estate workers to 1,000 rupees, fulfilling a long-standing demand. Presenting the budget proposals, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa said that according to the macroeconomic program of Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, the target of the government is to maintain an inclusive growth rate of 6% over the medium term. Addressing on the tax policy, the Prime Minister said that according to the Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, the government simplified the tax policy with effect from January 2020 in order to better facilitate taxpayers and to make the tax administration more efficient. The Prime Minister proposed to maintain the VAT unchanged at 8% for businesses with a turnover of more than 25 million rupees per month engaged in the import and manufacture of goods or provision of services, except in the case of banking, financial and insurance sectors. He added that outstanding dues on the taxes such as the economic service charge and the nation building tax are proposed to be settled through a mechanism which includes a concessionary payment plan based on the payment capacity, leading to a full and final settlement resulting in the closure of those files. Further, he said that the tax law will be amended where it will be mandatory for all companies to file their taxes only on an e-filing system with effect from April 1, 2021, and the use of the tax identification number in all tax and tax-related transactions. The Prime Minister said that personal income tax will apply on earnings from employment, rent, interest, dividends or any other source only if it exceeds 250,000 rupees per month. Withholding tax on rent, interest or dividends and the payee tax and taxes on interest have been abolished, he added. Individuals and companies engaged in farming, including agriculture, fisheries and livestock farming, will be exempted from taxes in the next 5 years, he further added. The Prime Minister indicated that the earnings from both domestic and foreign sources by those engaged in businesses in information technology and enabling services, and also their earnings when made while being resident or non-resident, will also be exempted from income taxes. He proposed to introduce punitive legal provisions to ensure that the private tax consultants and auditors representing the taxpayers and preparers and certificates fraudulent tax reports, aids and abates in such action will be faced with such consequence, including being barred from practicing. The Prime Minister proposed to open a Samruddhi Life Savings account for each Samruddhi beneficiary by the Samruddhi Bank and to credit the Samruddhi benefit to that account to provide an adequate income for the requirements that arises in their old age or for special requirements. He also proposed to implement a new Samruddhi Enterprise Development Loan Scheme utilizing 90% of the deposits made by Samruddhi banks in state banks to provide loans under an annual interest of 7% in order to enhance the home-based economies and entrepreneurial ventures of the Samruddhi beneficiaries. In order to encourage savings, he proposed to release the interest income of the welfare societies and institutions from income taxes, which was imposed by the previous government. To encourage private savings, he proposed to treat medical insurance, interest on housing loans, investments in government securities and shares of listed companies incurred up to 100,000 rupees per month as deductible expenditures in the calculation of personal income tax. In order to promote investments in the housing market through the Sri Lanka Real Estate Investment Trust regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, he proposed to exempt such investments from capital gains tax and dividends free from income tax and to reduce the stamp duty up to 0.75%. To promote the listing of local companies with the Colombo Stock Exchange, he proposed to provide a 50% tax concession for the years 2021 and 22 for such companies that are listed before December 31st, 2021 and to maintain a corporate tax rate of 14% for the subsequent 3 years. The Prime Minister also proposed to exempt the tax on dividends of foreign companies for 3 years if such dividends are reinvested on expansion of their businesses or in the money or stock market or the Sri Lanka international sovereign bonds. On instances when the commercial banks in Sri Lanka purchase Sri Lanka international sovereign bonds subject to a minimum of $100 million, he proposed to suspend the risk-weighted provisioning under central bank regulations for 3 years and to free the profits on capital and interest income of these investments from taxes. Investments exceeding $10 million with potential to change the landscape of the economy in the areas of export industries, dairy, fabric, tourism, agricultural products, processing and information technology will be provided with concessions up to a minimum of 10 years under the Strategic Development Law, he added. In order to promote the Colombo and Hambantota ports as commodity trading hubs in international trading and to encourage investments in bonded warehouses and warehouses related to offshore business, he proposed to exempt such investments for all taxes. In the context of resource constraints and identified priorities in the country, further strengthening of the Sri Lankan Navy has been given priority. He said that the nation must combat the drug menace and must eliminate the country from being a hub for international illicit drug trade. The government expects to ensure that investments will facilitate to control smuggling of goods, providing the required protection for the fisheries resources and fisheries communities and establishing a safe environment for carrying out tasks in the Indian Ocean. Further, he said that the government has also considered the short-term requirement for equipment and the infrastructure of the Sri Lanka Army and Air Force in the background of multiple tasks performed by them, including in disaster management. He proposed to allocate 20,000 million rupees as an additional provision for the tri-forces to fulfill the basic requirements identified in the medium-term and long-term planning frameworks in accordance with their basic requirements. The Prime Minister also said that the President has given special attention to enhance digital governance using information technology as a tool to simplify government mechanisms as well as market structures and processes, ensuring efficient and people-focused service delivery and exchange of knowledge. Establishment of an international e-commerce and e-payment systems, the high-speed data exchange system and the related mobile network systems are investment priorities. Therefore, the Prime Minister proposed a special allocation of 8,000 million rupees to expand the technology sector. He also proposed to create a techno-entrepreneur-led economy that will contribute to the increase of exports and foreign earnings from the technology field and broaden the knowledge and professional services to the national economy within the next 2 years. It is expected that the establishment of technology-centered investments and allied services industry, which transforms into high-income employment opportunities for our young men and women, he proposed to establish 5 fully-fledged plug-and-play technoparks in Galle, Kurunegala, Anuradhapura, Kandy and Batticaloa districts and proposed to allocate 10 million rupees to develop these technoparks as eco-friendly new cities connected to the expressway network and other infrastructure facilities. The Prime Minister emphasised that the investment in public health has become more important than ever. Accordingly, the Prime Minister proposed to provide an additional allocation of 18,000 million rupees for the expansion of maternity and child clinics, dispensaries and adult services centres, laboratory services, hospitals and research institutes with the required human resources to maintain a people-centric health service. He also proposed to create a new insurance scheme to support those who temporarily lose livelihoods due to the quarantine process related to epidemics including COVID. He further proposed to get businesses and factories with more than 50 employees to contribute 0.25% of the turnover to the proposed insurance fund. It is intended to use this insurance scheme for employed at retail and wholesale shops with more than 5 employees and hotels. The Prime Minister also proposed to implement a COVID insurance scheme with the assistance of the government in parallel to the Agraha insurance scheme for all public services. Prime Minister Rajapaksa pointed out the COVID-19 has dealt a serious blow to the tourism industry before it could barely recover from the collapse experienced due to the Easter attacks. The Prime Minister further pointed out the need to formulate strategies to develop the tourism industry that has diversified fairly well and the tourist attractions in the country under normal conditions while protecting them at this juncture. Although it will take time, there are many opportunities to develop the tourism industry as a sector worth over $10 billion, he added. Therefore, he proposed to extend the concessions and the recovery of loans granted under the refinancing facilities of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka until September 30, 2021. He proposed to provide the banks with a treasury guarantee covering 50% of such loans. He also proposed to make necessary amendments to simplify the taxes and fees levied by the local government institutions on tourism with an upper cap. Prime Minister Rajapaksa proposed to pay 2 rupees per dollar above the normal exchange rate for the foreign exchange remittances sent by foreign workers to banks in Sri Lanka. Measures have been taken to repatriate 45,000 employed persons from 126 countries who wanted to come to Sri Lanka in the wake of the COVID-19 epidemic. More facilities will be provided to the people who are expected to come in line with the existing health facilities in the country. Prime Minister Rajapaksa also proposed to increase the daily wage on plantation workers to 1,000 rupees from January 2021. The Premier said that he intends to present to Parliament in January a legal framework that will change the management agreements of plantation companies that are unable to pay this salary and provide opportunities for companies with successful business plans. He emphasized that the Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor aims to ensure that by 2030, at least 70% of the total energy requirement of the country could be sourced through renewable sources. Up to now, 300 megawatts of solar energy is added to the national grid, and it is expected to add 1,000 megawatts capacity through local investments within the period of 2021 to 2023, he added. The Prime Minister proposed to add a capacity of 500 megawatts to the grid by providing solar panels generating 5 kilowatts to 100,000 houses of low-income families through the loan schemes from the Asian Development Bank and the Indian Line of Credit to supplement the government's investments in the sector. He proposed to provide loans at an interest rate of 4% in this regard. The Prime Minister proposed to invest on installation of solar panels on rooftops of religious places, public institutions, hospitals, schools and defence establishments. He also proposed to facilitate private entrepreneurs at rural level to install solar power plants connected to 10,000 transformers under the theme Gamata Balagarayak, Gamata Vyavasayak. The Premier further proposed to provide capital grants of 150,000 rupees to 10,000 small and medium-scale commercial agro-entrepreneurs with agricultural wells to install solar power-operated water pumps in order to increase production capacities by harnessing new technology, including drip irrigation. He proposed to reduce the expenses on electricity by providing solar energy for lift irrigation and drinking water supply projects that use row plants. He also proposed to provide electricity either through solar energy or rural electricity generation schemes and to ensure the objective of electricity for all by the end of 2021. The Premier proposed to allocate 700 million rupees in this regard. He also proposed to increase renewable energy capacity to 1,000 megawatts by the expeditious implementation of both offshore wind and floating solar power plants exceeding 100 megawatts with incentives provided by the Board of Investment. He further proposed to allow a tax holiday of 7 years for all renewable energy projects. Under the Water for All national plan, the Prime Minister said that the government is planned to invest 1 trillion rupees in 2021-2024 in 1,000 community water projects, 171 major projects aimed at enhancing the production capacity, new water supply schemes and expedite ongoing projects with the objective of ensuring access to drinking water to the entire population. Under this mechanism, it is expected to increase daily volume of water supply from 2.1 million cubic meters to 4.4 million cubic meters and to provide pipe-borne drinking water to an additional 3.5 million families by laying at least 40,000 kilometers of pipes throughout the country. Commencing this initiative, 125 billion rupees is allocated for 2021 to implement 263 community water projects, enhance the usage of current water supply through 171 projects and to commence 40 new projects. The Export Development Board and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should take the lead in formulating bilateral trade agreements that will expand the market for exports of the country's specific agricultural products such as tea, cinnamon, pepper, traditional ornaments and consumer goods as well as toxic-free vegetables, grains and fruits, the Prime Minister added. He said that the government has taken steps to deploy the new foreign ambassadors in this regard. Free trade agreements will be drafted with strategies to bridge the trade gap by limiting imports through production of goods that can be manufactured within the country, facilitating industrial development, he added. Accordingly, the Prime Minister proposed to formulate a balanced trade policy yielding long-term returns to increase the export earnings of our industrial products and to save foreign exchange through import substitutions that could be produced locally. In meeting the needs and expectations of the people, especially those of the citizenry that is employed overseas and engages in commercial activities, it has been made necessary to restructure the Ministry of Foreign Relations and diplomatic missions abroad to go transcend its traditional diplomatic endeavours, he added. The Prime Minister said that it is required to expand the contribution of the diplomatic missions for the economic diplomacy in a way that optimizes the opportunities for exports, tourism, foreign employment and investment in our country under the dynamic world economic conditions. He said that the government considers it to be a prime responsibility of the diplomatic missions in their performance evaluations to review the bilateral agreements entered into from time to time and to implement the friendly and non-aligned foreign policy of the government in a way that secures the national security and sovereignty with due consideration to the contemporary trends and local economy. Prime Minister proposed to allocate 700 million rupees to take necessary steps to overcome the barriers faced by our entrepreneurs in order to utilize market opportunities presented in the emerging Asia-Pacific region, Africa, the Middle East and Western countries. The Premier further proposed to reduce the maximum interest charged on housing and property loans on public servants granted by banks under housing loans and advances up to a maximum of 7% and to implement an insurance scheme through Sri Lanka Export Insurance Corporation with the contribution of an insurance premium of 1% of the export revenue to accelerate the financing facilities through the export receipt confirmation. The Prime Minister proposed to ban the usage of single-use polythene and plastics with effect from January 1, 2021 to ensure the management of polythene and plastic waste in an environmentally sensitive manner. The pollution in the river basins of the country is mainly caused by irregular human activities, urbanization and industrialization, he added. Therefore, he proposed to allocate an additional amount of 200 million rupees for identified priority programs such as the prevention of irregular disposal of sewage and regulation of sand mining according to an established mechanism in line with the prescribed conservation requirements.
The customary tea party of the Parliament was held this evening following the presentation of the budget. The occasion was organized adhering to health protective guidelines due to the prevailing COVID-19 situation in the country. Both government and opposition parliamentarians were present at this occasion. And the chief epidemiologist, Dr. Sudhat Samarveera, says that the state and private sector institutions to take necessary precautions to create a COVID-free environment for their respective employees.
We can see that in some institutions cases are reported. So the institutions are having some sort of responsibility to take health measures in their institutions. When the people come to an institution, that the workers that they should adhere to health guidelines, that is that keeping the distance all the time, as well as that wearing masks throughout when they are working, and especially that during the lunch hour and tea hours, that tea breaks, that they should not get together, and also when they are entering and going out, that after the finishing work should not get congested at gates, that should maintain the distance all the time. And also in most of the institutions that use that fingerprints to mark the attendance, but you can use it very safely by that washing the hands before using it, or using the alcohol sanitizers and cleaning the fingers before the placing the fingerprint. And also that fingerprint scanner also should be cleaned with alcohol sanitizers frequently. And also after the placing the fingerprint, the people should again wash their hands. So with that we will be able to prevent any spread of the disease through fingerprinting. And also in different surfaces that this virus can exist. So because of that, all the commonly touching areas in office should be cleaned very frequently with either soap and water or any other detergent or alcohol sanitizer. With that we will be able to control the disease or prevent disease spreading in institutions. And as well as there will be suppliers to the institution and also visitors coming to the institution. That institution should maintain a register with name, contact details of all the people who are coming there. So in case that if a case find that then it is very easy to trace back all the contacts. And also that if somebody is having cough, cold and other COVID-19 like symptoms including fever, they should not attend work. And also if somebody fallen sick with these symptoms during work, they should be immediately isolated within the institution, and also with the medical advice either should send to the hospital for treatment or should send to the home for resting. And also if somebody is having this type of symptom, should contact the area public health inspector and the medical officer of health and should inform them, then they will arrange PCR testing if it is necessary.
The National Operational Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreaks says that a total of 12,210 COVID-19 recoveries were recorded in the country at present. Meanwhile, 404 fully cured patients have left the hospitals today. Director of the Keval General Hospital, Dr. Mihiri Priyangani, says that another batch of 46 patients at the COVID-19 treatment centre in Pinnavala have fully recovered and left the centre. The recovered patients have been identified as residents from Colombo. A batch of 24 patients at Galaela COVID-19 treatment centre in Polonnaruwa have fully recovered and left the centre. They have been identified as residents from Colombo, Galle, Kegal and Ampara districts. A total of 7,811 COVID-19 recoveries were reported in the country since the beginning of this month. The highest number of recoveries were reported from November 5th. Another 404 recoveries were recorded today. The percentage of COVID-19 recoveries in the country has increased to 68.48%, while the percentage of active COVID-19 patients currently receiving treatment stands at 31.18%. A total of 12,210 COVID-19 patients were detected from the country today. The patients have been identified as close contacts of the Paliagoda COVID-19 cluster. A total of 10,713 PCR tests were conducted yesterday. Accordingly, 682,211 PCR tests have been conducted in the country at present. Sri Lanka Army Commander Lieutenant General Shamindra Silva has said that steps will be taken to repatriate Sri Lankans stranded abroad in accordance to a special methodology without causing a further spread of COVID-19 outbreak among the communities in the country. Meanwhile, a total of 60 COVID-19 patients have been detected from the Lady Ridgeway Children's Hospital. 16 out of them have been identified as staff members of the hospital, while the others have been identified as children and mothers who had arrived at the hospital for treatments. Following the lifting of the travel restrictions imposed on the Western Province, the transportation services in relevant areas have returned to normalcy. However, 24 police divisions in the Western Province are still under isolation. This includes 17 police divisions in the Colombo Division and 7 police divisions in the Gampar district. Functionalities of state and semi-government institutions and statutory boards and their headquarters in Maradana, Colombo, Fort, Peta, Slave Island, Vallavidya and Kesalvata police divisions can be maintained. Meanwhile, services of the Central Bus Station, Private Bus Station and Railway Station in Colombo Fort and Peta police divisions has been resumed in a normal manner. Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samaravira says that measures have been taken to curb the further spread of COVID-19 in Colombo district after detecting the area as a COVID-19 hotspot. He made these remarks today at a press briefing.
That Western Province is the very most high-risk area in the country, and out of that, Colombo Municipal Council area is having the highest risk. Other areas are having a low risk. With that, we have identified that in some institutions that this is spreading. For example, in the prisons that it is spreading, and that we have taken all the measures to control it, to spread or to disseminate these people into different camps and to ease out their congestion in the prisons. In order to control the spread of the disease, as well as that we are identifying among the police officers, especially in the Colombo district, that this is spreading, and that we have quarantined all the people who has the contacts of the cases, and we are doing the PCR in orderly manner. With that, we hope that we will be able to control these clusters.
Minister Kelia Rambukwala says that the water supply project of the southern bank of the Kalania River is set to commence tomorrow. He made these remarks while addressing the meeting held to announce the cabinet decisions today. Minister Kelia Rambukwala said that the project will be initiated covering 13 divisional secretariat divisions. The minister also said that 120,000 people will be benefited through this project. He said that the areas affected with low pressure water supply will be targeted under this project. Responding to a query raised by a journalist, the minister said that allegations levelled by the opposition claiming that the government has failed are baseless. Minister Kelia Rambukwala said that the opposition has started an organised propaganda campaign targeting the government. They have come up with a tagline claiming that Sir has failed, he added. The minister said that this move by the opposition has criticised by the masses. He further added that the public has taken social media platform to show their displeasure on this propaganda campaign. He said that the President Rajapaksa was able to obtain 2/3 majority in parliament after 9 months in office. The Cabinet of Ministers had granted approval to implement a unitary digital identity framework and e-national identity card project.
තුනෙන් දෙක වලයක් ලබා ගන්නවා. ඒකට නම් ෆේල් කියන්නේ මේ කට්ටියට ෆේල් පාස් කියන වචන දෙක තේරුම නිවැරදිව පහදලා දෙන්නට ඕනේ. මම හිතනවා මේ රටේ ජනතාව ඒක කරයි කියලා.
The framework has been prepared jointly by the Sri Lanka Information and Communication Technology Agency and the Department of Registration of Persons. The proposal was tabled by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The program to recruit 100,000 multi-purpose development task assistants is currently underway. The recruited persons will be directed to a 6-month training on 25 fields. The Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal tabled by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to entrust the training to the National Apprentice and Technical Training Authority. The Cabinet of Ministers has also approved the proposal to introduce an arbitration mechanism for solving employee disputes in the state sector. Accordingly, a committee will be appointed to introduce a mechanism similar to the private sector, which adhere to solve employee disputes at present. The proposal was tabled by Minister Janaka Bannar Tennakon. Cabinet of Ministers granted approval to change the name of Manthai Salt Limited to National Salt Company and to transfer the ownership of all government-owned salt pans in Northern Province to a National Salt Company. The proposal was presented by Minister Vimal Veeravansa.
And the Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect, Agamaha Pandita Most Venerable Napane Pemasiri Thera, passed away today. He was 98 years of age upon his demise, and he was the 13th Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect. Ekanayaka Mudiyansalage Mahakumbure Gedara Tikiri Bandara was born in Napane village in Pathadumbara, Udagampa, Korle in Kandy on January 20th, 1923. The late Thera received his primary education at Walala Primary School, then moved to Gunnapana Amunagama Mahavidyalaya for higher education. Child Tikiri Bandara entered into priesthood as Napane Pemasiri in 1933 under the direction of former Deputy Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect, Late Venerable Theripaha Sirisila Vangshathera. He was admitted to the Vallavatas Sri Dharmodaya Pirivena in 1935 and obtained his Upasampada in 1943. Commencing his teaching career in 1948 at Nittambo Vidyananda Pirivena, late Thera taught many subjects including Pali, Sinhala, Sanskrit and Buddhist philosophy. Inaugurating the Manikhinna Hurikadua Vidyasagara Pirivena in 1967, the late Thera became the first Parivenadipati of the Pirivena. The late Thera was then appointed to the chairmanship of the Kandy Divisional Sangha Sabha in 1980 and subsequently to the registrar of the Sangha Sabha of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect in 1986. Then he was appointed as the Sanya registrar of the sect in 1987, following his appointment to the Adhikarana Sangha Nayaka post in 1988. He was awarded with the Agga Mahapandita distinction by the state of Myanmar in 2008. Late Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect, Agamaha Pandita Most Venerable Napane Pemasiri Thera, had rendered an enormous service for the betterment of the Sambuddha Sasana in the country. Appreciating his services to the Buddha Sasana, the late Thera was appointed to the Chief Prelateship of the Ramanya sect following the demise of the Most Venerable Vevaldeniye Medalankara Thera. The final rites of the Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Ramanya sect, Agamaha Pandita Most Venerable Napane Pemasiri Thera, will be held next Sunday at Kundasale Bandaranayak College grounds from 2 p.m. onwards.
Former Army Commander General Mahesh Senanayake says that he believes that there was a hidden agenda of releasing a key suspect of the Easter Sunday bomb attack behind the phone call made by former Minister Rishad Badruddin to him. General Senanayake was giving evidence online from Dubai to the Presidential Commission inquiring on the Easter Sunday attacks. He says the suspect is still in remand custody. The Commission inquired on the incident of a certain politician made a phone call to the Army Commander to inquire about a suspect. Answering a question raised by the State Council, the former Army Commander General Mahesh Senanayake said that former Minister Rishad Badruddin made a phone call to him several days after the Easter Sunday attack. Badruddin inquired whether the Army had arrested a suspect named Ahmed from Dehiwala. On the first occasion, the Army Commander said he mentioned that he was not aware about such an attack. Then the former Minister Badruddin made the second phone call to the General Senanayake, mentioning that the suspect was a son of coordinating secretary of one of the ministries under him and asked the Army Commander to do whatever he can in this issue. General Senanayake said former Minister Badruddin phoned him from the third time and inquired about the same suspect. He said that he informed former Minister Badruddin to phone him following a 2-year period to ask a favour regarding the suspect. He said releasing or providing relief to the suspect was not an action in his priorities. The chairman of the commission inquired the former Army Commander asking to give reasons to behave emotionally during this incident. General Senanayake said even after the Easter Sunday attacks, there was no one to control the situation in the country. Therefore, he had to mobilize army units according to a plan unique to him to uplift the security in the country following the Easter Sunday attacks. Former army commander reiterated that only security forces fulfilled their duties in the aftermath of the attacks, as there was no organized plan to face the newly emerged threat. Finally, he said that if somebody phoned police or the army following an arrest of an suspect, there is no other motive rather than releasing him from custody. He said the motive of Rishad Badruddin could also be same.
And that's it for tonight's news. Do watch us tomorrow at the very same time. Good night.